Everyone, it's Julian, and we are the 20th of June to like for a small market update and for me to give you like my view about the current situation. Definitely the last few weeks in crypto was wild, but we had in the past market movement like that, especially during like the COVID crash. So if we recap, since kind of like the macro kind of issues in America, Bitcoin started to drop a bit. Then we had like Luna kind of like crash, and then Celsius and all the liquidation that followed with like 3 Hour Capital and other like many kind of like lender services or hedge funds. For sure, what's really important for me to see if like we have a bottom or a market capitulation is to look at the volume and like what's happening at what pace. And we definitely had like a movement back in uh, during the COVID crash where if you were looking at the imbalance in all the books, that was super big, like 2020. So uh, it's quite a decent sign, especially when you have like 12 weeks in a row that are bearish. Um, it's crypto. It's super difficult to like. This market is like super new and like like all the event we had was quite a big surprise for a lot of players. This is why I think many big hedge funds in crypto or like quantitative kind of firms were in big trouble because of like this kind of like movement that was kind of like out of like the normal distribution of like traditional or like the market we had in crypto since the last few years. So if we look at Nasdaq right now, we can see that in 2 weeks we had like a kind of like a big drop, so about 15%. It really demonstrates how weak is the macroeconomy and like the sentiment in the market in the US right now and in the world in general. So that's why crypto is not helped by what's happening on the different kind of like traditional finance. And this is why I'm not that bullish or really like a super fan of like crypto right now in terms of like of course I'm bullish long term, and I think many of you are bullish long term, but it's always difficult to say are we close to a bottom and how to manage the risk. And that's really what I want to share with you today, is like how to help you manage the risk and know how to have in your kind of like investment a few like ideas on how to be sure that you are not over leveraged or whatsoever. What's interesting is that the last move we had in like the last week in crypto is that I do believe that altcoins didn't dropped or moved a lot or a bit, like I don't know, minus 10 or 20%, which is a lot, but compared to the volatility of the market is not that much. When Bitcoin and Ethereum really got oversold, mainly because of all these kind of like on-chain or big players kind of margin call and liquidations. And this is why I think we had like a super big opportunities like in Bitcoin and Ethereum because of like the big drop we had. And since then, I think Ethereum is already up 30% and Bitcoin already up 20%. So it's super kind of like volatile, but that's the market. So if we look at Bitcoin right now in a weekly time frame, so you can see we had like a drop since the all-time high of like 75%. So it's super big. And if you look at all long-term models that I'm not a big fan of, they all say that we are in a good spot to purchase Bitcoin for long term and so on. And I tend to agree with that in terms of statistics and how we are able to revert in the market. For Ethereum, it's even worse, the drop we had, mainly because when Ethereum went below $2,000, we had a bunch of on-chain liquidation on Aave and so on over like 9 figures. So that really like forced the price to go down a lot. Regarding altcoins, I don't think they had moved a lot in the last 1 or 2 weeks. If you look compared to the volatility, of course, but really I think it's really like Bitcoin and Ethereum that are really oversold in the market right now compared to altcoins. To get back to what we said in the last video, which was like the 18th of May. So the with some we the idea was like the macro was still super bearish in the US and in markets in general, and the trend was still bearish, and that when you are in a bearish trend, all the bounce you have are mainly sold by players because like they want to reduce their risk or because I don't know they know they are in the bear market and they want to sell and reduce their loss. So every time we had a bounce, then you have a drop, and then you have like some kind of like a bigger drop in the bigger momentum in the drop until you reach a bottom. And be super cautious with what you are listening to on Twitter and so on. It's almost impossible to give a bottom in Ethereum right now, mainly because like you don't know who is positioned with like liquidation prices, or who will be in big issue when Ethereum is dropping below a certain number. And this is why you have to wait to see the price do something more like that when you have like some kind of like correction or consolidation, in price, rather than just a super big bearish trend. You need to have some kind of like slowdown in the trend, or more kind of like stabilization in terms of pricing, to make sure that all players that were in trouble do have time to reorganize themselves, look at their exposure, edge themselves, and so on. And then you have a better view of the market. So right now, so we are the 20th of June. Definitely there is some big issues in the fact that inflation is still out of control in America. And we know that because of like the last figures we had, and of course of what the Fed is definitely trying to explain in their reports and so on. So they will not change kind of like their policy. So they will tighten the economy. So that's definitely not good for markets in general, and so crypto. So this is why the macroeconomy and the trend is still bearish, rather in crypto and in the traditional kind of like markets. Regarding the trend, I think in crypto we are close to see some kind of like either a slowdown in this bearish trend, or kind of like reversal, or more like kind of like consolidation. But definitely be super cautious, because if we look at what happened, sorry, if we look at what happened in the previous cycle, let me because like the price. Okay, let me change just the time frame, just for you to have an idea of like the time. So when we had the last top of cycle, we had like like the time where you reach the bottom, and then the time is super long. So during this time, you would rather kind of like, I don't know, learn stuff, learn crypto, build a decentralized application, I don't know, rather than looking prices, or like just, I don't know, trade. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because it can be super long. Definitely the scenario we have right now is a bit different, because like the drop was so fast that we can definitely have a bottom that is way more important than when we had in the past, and then a bounce, and then, I don't know, the price moving between different kind of like price ranges. But still, be super cautious. It's super difficult to say. The trend is still bearish, and it's almost impossible to know if we have a reversal or not. So that's the more important thing. What's important is that I think this macro kind of vicious cycle we had in crypto, regarding the fact that we had the Luna crash, then Free Arrow Capital kind of like big issues and big liquidations. Then we have Celsius and all these on-chain liquidations. Also the fact that Nasdaq SP 500 is dumping doesn't help crypto. So we had all these factors. Definitely they will come to an end, but it's difficult to know when and how they will come to an end. So that's why you need to be cautious on like how you manage your risk in terms of percentage allocation, in like, I don't know, altcoins, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and so on and so on. And I think keeping a big amount of like keeping some kind of like stable coins regarding the risk you want to take is definitely relevant. When the market is super bearish, the idea is like really to make sure you are protecting your money, reducing your risk. This is why the thread, the Twitter kind of like post that I shared to you about the fact that few kind of advices in order to reduce your risk, no leverage, be super cautious with like a bunch of stuff, to make sure you don't do like you don't, I don't know, make bad decision because of like you think there is an opportunity, especially when the market is that much volatile. But my view right now is that I think we are close to the end of like all this kind of like vicious cycle we had in the past few weeks. That Bitcoin and Ethereum are definitely more relevant in terms of market pricing regarding the market cap compared to what they are in the fundamental and the last kind of like price action, compared to many other altcoins. And regarding capitulation, we heard a lot of people talk about that on Twitter. I think it's difficult because until the bottom is not in, it's difficult to say did we had a capitulation or whatsoever. Um, so yeah, that's the thing. For the thing, I think like it's quite nice that we had that in crypto. Is about like because of like the cycle and like the volatility is so high and the drop has been so high, that we have more cycle inside like a big cycle of a cycle of like just Nasdaq, for example. And I think that's super kind of relevant, especially for young people that try to build application, to build stuff in crypto because they have time, they have more opportunities, and that's the most important thing. So definitely be super cautious with your risk. What I always recommend is that you look at your exposure right now in terms of percentage of your portfolio. I think it's important to follow that because of like sometimes I don't know, Ethereum can drop more than Bitcoin, then your percentage allocation doesn't do change, and then you don't really know what you have in your portfolio, and that's the most important thing. Manage your risk, and make sure you really do research on the coins you are buying. I see too many people buying because they see someone buying on Twitter. That's not what you want. Let's take an example. For example, if you look at Cadena, definitely had like a super kind of like important drop because of like the market and like everything. But the thing is that that's I think if you do your research, perhaps you like this project, you like the team behind the project, but you have to look at the economics of the tokens. What's the inflation? What if you buy this token? What can you do with the token in order to have some kind of, I don't know, a yield or a staking kind of stuff? And be super cautious, having 10 or 20% interest in a token with like a bigger inflation about of that, or doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of like risk reward. So be super cautious, especially during this kind of like bear market. You have a bunch of change in terms of token economics, like for example Chainlink does change with like the staking and so on, what they are doing behind the scene. So you want to be super cautious about that to really make sure you do the right decision. But regarding the price, let's see what Bitcoin will do like in the coming days, especially if like the traditional markets continue to drop. The idea right now is that if you want to make sure you have a bottom, is just having the price not going below this kind of level, because perhaps below that we will have more liquidation. And the idea is like people think they missed the kind of like bottom. So when price is dropping, they are getting into the market in order to just not miss the next kind of like dip, and make sure they got the best price according to them. And this is where you realize that the amount of buyers right now, if the price drop a bit, would be enough for the price to go up again. And this is where you can kind of have like a change of potentially of a market trend. But still, the trend is bearish, so you have to be cautious. You have to be cautious because the trend is bearish. And it's always the same, in a bear market, do not underestimate how news and fundamentals can change that quickly. Let's say tomorrow a lot of like miners miners stop mining Bitcoin, hash rate is going down, you will see more FUD in the media and so on, and it's kind of like a vicious circle. So that's why be super cautious, and I think it's time to build and to learn, and make sure you always manage your risk in crypto.